Assalamu alaikum students. Now let's talk about Muslims and marginalization. So as per Census 2001, the population of Muslims in India was 13.4%. Means Muslims constitute 13.4% of India's total population, and which went up to 14.23% in 2011 as per Census 2011. So when we look into the census of 2011, what we find is that the population went up from 13.4% in 2001 to 14.23% in 2011. But sadly, though the population went up to 14.3% to 3%, but sadly, Muslims in India are considered, the marginalized community compared to the rest, compared to the other communities living in India. Because as over the years, this community has been deprived of benefits of socio-economic development of the country. And let me give you certain figures. As you can see on the board, how Muslim community is being marginalized in India. How what are the different conditions? What are the different actually development where Muslim community is lagging behind? Okay, let me show you here also on the whiteboard. Okay, if we take the education, the literacy rate of Muslims, quoting Census 2000, I'm quoting Census 2011. So, literacy rate among Muslims is just 57%, which is far, far, far below than the national average, and which is 74%. The overall literacy rate of India is 74%. The national average is 74%. But when we look at the literacy rate of Muslims in India, so it is just 57%. So there is a difference of 17%, a huge difference of 17% between literacy rates of Muslims in India and the rest of the population in India, living in India. So this is one of the important factors or of important indicators that actually shows the marginalization, the backwardness of the Muslims in India. And talking about the public employment, let's see where Muslims stand. PM's, I will quote PM's, Prime Minister's High Level Committee Report 2006. So as per this report, Prime Minister's High Level Committee Report 2006, so at that time, the Muslims constituted, first I'll talk of the population. At that time, Muslim population at that time was 13.5% approximately. But their share as far as the employment is concerned, so in IAS, what we find, Indian Administrative Service, so only 3% Muslims are employed as IAS, or recruited as IAS. So in IPS, the percentage is just 4%, while our share should be in proportion to our population, that is 13.5%. So around 14% or 13%, we should be actually having 13% share in IAS or IPS. But what we find is entirely, deplorable conditions of Muslims. So when we see the IAS, these, posts or employment, we see just 3% of Muslims being there, and in IPS, just 4% of Muslims being there. And apart from this, we have CPSU. So as you can also see, Central Public Sector Unit. In Central Public Sector Unit means in the central government services, only 3.3 Muslims are employed. Only 3.3% of Muslims are employed in CPSU when our proportion to population is 13.5% as per 2006 report, this PM's HLC High Level Committee report 2006. And as far as the state PSU public sector unit is concerned, so Muslims have 10.8% of people employed in state PSUs, and banks and RBI, if we talk about, when we look at the economic conditions, so the proportion of Muslims in the public employment, be it IAS, be it IPS, or be it CPSU, so we are lagging far behind. So and bank and RBI, in banks and RBI, so we have just 2.2% people employed in them. So this is how, and there are other actually statistics available here, as you can see on the screen, and can figure it out. So how deplorable the conditions of the Muslims are in India. So these are the factors actually that lead to the marginalization of the Muslims, and these factors also reflect their deprivation, their exclusion, their marginalization. And there are other factors. These are not the only factors. There are other factors that lead to the marginalization of Indians. Other factors. So in other factors, I would quote number 1, political representation. Political representation. So first, so how many Muslim representatives are there in the Parliament of India? It's quite low, just 26 people, less than, as per census 2011, so Muslims constitute 14.23% population. So we should be having 14.3% this representatives in the parliament, but what we see is just less than 4% or just 4% in the parliament. Just 26 representatives are there in the Parliament of India. So you can Google it, as as per the 2019 elections, Lok Sabha elections, you can see that only 26 Muslim representatives could make it to the lower house of the parliament, which is Lok Sabha. So which is just the around 4% of the this total representatives of the parliament, while our share to the population of India is 14.23. So our share there in the political institution, this representative institution, parliament, should be 14% around. There should be at least more than 70 members of Muslim community representing Muslims in Parliament of India. And when we look at the political representation the Muslim representatives in the state assemblies across India, and what we find is the condition is even more deplorable there also. And second, so political representation is one, political representation, so we are lagging behind there. So it's quite less, quite less, we lag behind. And second is the failure of the government to address the issues of Muslim community. So let me give you certain examples. For example, cow vigilantism. Cow vigilantism. So recently, you may have heard the newspaper reports that in the name of the cow vigilantism, Muslims are being targeted across India. They are being mob lynched by the extremist Hindus. So let me quote you an example. And they are also beaten for what they eat. So it reminds me of an incident that happened in just few years back. Muhammad Akhlaq, on the suspicion that he had prepared beef at home, he was actually beaten to death. He was hit with a stone, he was hit with a brick in his head, and he was beaten to death. So this is actually, we have several examples to show that Muslims are, actually they are being discriminated against. Violence is unleashed against them, and government is not doing, enough to protect these. To protect these Muslims, to protect the minority group, which is being harassed every now and then by the extremist Hindus. And it also reminds me of an incident of one of the guys of Jharkhand. His name was I don't remember his name, but he was for not chanting Jai Shri Ram, he was beaten to death by the extremist mob of Hindus. So this is actually, yes, Tabriz Ansari, his name was Tabriz Ansari. Now I got the name, that he was beaten to death. He was just on the suspicion of the bike theft, and later he was forced to chant Jai Shri Ram, and for not chanting Jai Shri Ram, he was actually harshly, severely beaten by the Hindu extremists. And apart from this, there is a biased news channels that reign different hashtags like hashtag Love Jihad, Corona Jihad, against Muslims. These channels, and everybody knows what these channels are. Everybody is aware of it, so we don't need to name those channels or expose those channels. Everybody is aware of it, what those channels are, and they have actually deliberately targeted the Muslim community. As you might have read, they have actually reigned on their news channels, TV channels, Corona Jihad, Tablighi Jamaat. Actually, a religious conference was being held at the Nizamuddin Awliya at Delhi. So then it was alleged that these ulamas, the members of the Tablighi Jamaat are there to separate Corona, because some of them turned out to be positive cases in coronavirus, but later it was alleged that they are spreading this jihad. They are actually spreading this virus, killing Hindus across India by this virus. And apart from this running hashtags like Love Jihad or Corona Jihad against Muslim community. So what we have seen so far is communal violence also. Communal violence. So there are a number of incidents since India got independence when violence against Muslims was unleashed. So there was what we call the communal violence. So we have, let me use some examples. Communal violence. You may have heard of Gujarat riots in 2002. So Nagar riots in 2013 when Congress was in power. So then we have Gujarat riots, then Nagar 2013. Or we have other instances also like demolition of Babri Masjid. So this is actually the communal violence is also one of the actually tools that are used to target actually Muslims that is responsible for marginalization, deprivation of the Muslims. So one of the prominent journalists of India, Ravish Kumar, and media has not been fair enough to Muslims, and that's why this prominent journalist Ravish Kumar has described these channels as Godi media. And it is also alleged that NRC and National Citizenship Citizenship Amendment Act, National Register of Citizens and Citizenship Amendment Act it's also being alleged that the government has ulterior motives of getting bringing up this policy of NRC and the law of CAA, the motive of actually turning Muslim community, stripping them actually these Muslims of their citizenship rights and turning them into second class citizens. And you might have heard that there have been the anti-CAA or anti-NRC protesters across India, especially in Assam or in what we call the Shaheen Bagh in Delhi. So this is how government of the day has to take certain concrete steps so that the Muslims problems of Muslims are actually resolved, and they are so that their issues are resolved amicably, and the marginalization is done away with. So with this, we are done with the Muslims and the marginalization.